Hello everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel. Today's video is all about the brand new Simon Hurley Lunar Paste colors and paste tools. With these 3 new colors of Lunar Paste that Ranger sent me, I now have an entire collection of 12 different colors, and I think many of you know what that means. It's time to swatch them out. So let's take a look at these 3 new colors, swatch them out, compare them to the colors that already existed, and check out the brand new tools as well. First up, Simon Hurley has added a new orange to the collection, and this is called Roar. You can see all the shine in the bottle. If you've used these before, you know they're buttery smooth as well. Next up is a new yellow, and it is called Shooting Star. So if you're familiar with the Simon Hurley colors, Shooting Star is a nice bright yellow. Last but not least, a new color that is called Tropical Tango. This is a really nice teal color, and again, all that beautiful metallic shine is in the color itself, so it doesn't separate out at all. So those are the 3 new colors that have been added to the Simon Hurley for Ranger Lunar Paste collection. Now let's take a look at the new tools. So first up is the tool set, and there are 3 items that come in this tool set. So you can see that there are 2 large scrapers and there is 1 palette knife. Now the 2 large scrapers are pretty much the same thing. It's just nice to have 2 so that you can use them quickly on a project without having to clean in between. To create my swatches, I'm going to use Catherine Pooler tag dies to cut out black and white cardstock. So I recommend using cardstock that you're going to be working on typically. So I'm using Nina Solar White 110 pound and some thick black cardstock as well. I'm using a palette knife to smear the Lunar Paste at the top of the tag so you can see, you can get a little texture with that palette knife, or you can get it nice and smooth. And then I'm going to use a domed foam blender at the bottom of the tag. These are the 2 ways that I might like to apply Lunar Paste, and you can see that depending on how you apply it, you're going to get a different effect and look on those 2 different cardstocks. So that's Roar on white and black cardstock. I'm going to do Shooting Star next. Same thing. So when you create texture with the palette knife, it will dry in that texture. It will dry dimensional. When you smooth it out, you're going to see how shiny and metallic it is when it is smooth, and you can see how it stands up on that black cardstock so beautifully. Again, with the domed foam blender, you're going to get a lighter touch, which is going to dry a lot faster. That's one benefit of that. And it also just gives a different effect. And I like to have both of those on my swatch so I can decide which color I want to use and how I want to apply it depending on the card that I'm working on. And again, you can use that domed foam blender to blot it, or you can even rub it the way that you would with ink. Just be sure that you clean those foams right away, because if it dries on the foam, it's going to harden the foam out. So those are the 3 new colors, and I'm going to add them to my other collection, and I'm putting the domed foam with a piece of Velcro on each lid of my Lunar Paste. So here's Roar, the new color, compared to Traffic Cone. Traffic Cone definitely has a little more pink in it, whereas Roar is a more, say, traditional orange. Same thing with Shooting Star, a more traditional yellow, whereas Slippery When Wet and Psych are kind of a warm gold and a cool gold. And then with Tropical Tango, you definitely get that teal effect, whereas Minty Fresh is definitely minty, and later Gator is kind of that bright green. So these new colors are definitely very different from what is already available in the palette. And so now let's just see the entire rainbow, starting from Bee Sting to Prom Queen, Traffic Cone to Roar, Shooting Star to Psych, Slippery When Wet, later Gator, Minty Fresh, Tropical Tango, then Clear Skies, and Triple Berry. Now that you've seen the new Lunar Paste colors and the new paste tools, I have a few ways to use them on your card making. So one way to use the new paste colors and the new paste tools is to use a stencil. I'm going to tape down on the back of the stencil. This is Tiny Diamonds from Simon Hurley, a piece of white cardstock. Now I have my tropical Tango, and I'm just going to use what's left in the lid and a domed foam blender to apply a nice thin coverage over the stencil. That's what I love about the foam blender, is that you get a nice light thin coverage, but it does not sacrifice the metallic shine to it. It just doesn't take as long to dry, which is really cool. And it also is not dimensional. So I did want to add a little bit of some extra dimension and shine. So I'm putting a few blobs of the shooting star on the scraper tool, and then I'm going to drag it across the stencil. Now, if you drag it use a lot of pressure when you're dragging it, you're going to get a nice thin, even coverage, but you're going to see the difference between even that thin, even coverage and the foam blender when I pull off the stencil. So I'm just adding a little bit of the yellow. I also love how you can get those multicolored diamonds in there, and then you can see the difference between the slight dimension that even you can get with the scraper and the foam blender, which is flat. So I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to start stamping out some of the owls from Simon Hurley's Owl Buddies stamp set. I'm going to use the Stamper's Secret priming tool, which just helps you to get a clear impression from the get-go. So you just wipe it across the stamps, and then you don't have to use up your Versamark ink to do that, to prime those stamps. I'm using Gina K Designs Amalgam ink, which will allow me to use alcohol markers if I want, or watercolor. One I'm going to use alcohol markers, and one I'm going to ink blend on top of. And then I'm going to use my Stamper's Secret Debby tool to add pressure to the outside to get lots of pressure and be able to stamp all those stamps. Okay, so for this owl, I am just going to ink blend on top. So you can see I have a blue color, a yellow color, and a pink color, and I'm going to use a foam blender with those, and I'm going to overlap those primaries so that I'm going to create a little orange between the pink and yellow and a little green between the blue and yellow. This is a great way to make new colors. They blend beautifully, and also to get an entire rainbow with just 3 colors. So I am going to fussy cut that owl out and then set that aside, and then I'm going to stamp a sentiment from the stamp set on some black cardstock, and I'm going to treat it with anti-static powder tool, stamp it with Versamark ink until I get a really good impression there, and then pour some white heat embossing powder on top, and then heat set that with my heat tool so that I can have a really great sentiment that stands out. I'm going to use a Sharpie to cover up a couple of those little bits of embossing powder that got where I didn't want them. That happens no matter what I do, it seems, although it's a lot better with the rabbit hole embossing powder tool, but I still get a couple every once in a while. And then I'm going to pop up that multicolor owl on the back of that, on the front of the black cardstock. On the back, I'm going to use some tape runner, lots of tape runner, because I'm applying it onto dry Lunar paste. I want to make sure this stays. So I did use a ton of that tape runner. You could use liquid adhesive as well. And there is our first little owl card with the new Lunar pastes. I'm going to use the same stencil, only this time I'm going to use some colorful cardstock. You don't always have to use black, although these colors really pop on black cardstock, but they also look really cool on dark colors of cardstock. So I'm using kind of a cobalt blue on the background there, and this time I'm putting a few blobs of Roar and then a few blobs of Shooting Star, one next to the other, to create a multicolor look with the scraper. So this time I'm using the scraper for the entire background, which I am using a little bit more than I would normally so that I can get dimension and show you how it can dry dimensionally as well. So I'll have a little overlap between the colors. There'll be a little bit of blending as well, which I really love. So this is a card that you could do in any combination of colors, and I'm going to make a graduation card. So if you have a certain combination of colors for your graduate, you could do them in those colors to to create that custom card. So I did color in this owl with some alcohol markers, and I'm just going to adhere the little fussy cut graduation hat down to the owl itself. I also stamped and cut into rectangles a couple of sentiments. So I'm gonna pop up my owl in the center of the card. Now, of course, I had to wait until that is fully dried, otherwise it's just gonna smear everything. And I want to use my Thermoweb foam squares for this. They happen to be a little stickier than some other foam squares I've used, and they work really well on the Lunar paste. So congrats, grad, and you're wise beyond your years. For this card, I'm going to work on some distressed watercolor cardstock. I wasn't sure if I was going to add water or not, so I felt better safe than sorry, and let's work on that watercolor cardstock. I decided instead to use the scraper to create swipes of color from left to right, and you can see I'm leaving some of the texture and I'm overlapping all of the colors. That's going to make it look like a paintbrush swipe of color. So even though I'm using a plastic scraper here, I'm getting a very organic paintbrush artistic look in my background, and of course it had to be a rainbow. Now I wasn't sure this was going to work or not, but I am going to stamp and heat emboss on top of all that Lunar paste. So I put it in my mini MISTI, have my stamps all set up and ready to go, and I am definitely going to treat this with a ton of anti-static powder. So again, I'm using Rabbit Hole Designs. I find this to be the best way to apply anti-static powder and a really great powder to use that doesn't allow things to stick. I should probably have used more on the black because I used a ton here and it worked like a charm. So now I'm going to ink up my stamps. I have a sentiment and an owl from the stamp set with Versamark ink, and I'm going to use my Debby tool to get lots of pressure because I don't want to have to double stamp it and possibly slide the image or slip the image at all so that it kind of is smeared. Now I'm just pouring a ton of white heat embossing powder on top and then tapping off the excess. And I was surprised at how well the heat embossing powder took onto the Versamark on top of the Lunar paste, and then how easy it was to heat set it without reactivating or damaging that Lunar paste. So check out that background with that white heat embossing on top. It just pops. Now, when you have a slightly warped panel, I've recommended this before, put a ton of tape runner on the back and then lay it on some cardstock. It gives you that margin, but it also helps to flatten out that panel. If you want to see more ways to use Lunar paste, I have a whole other video over here. If you enjoy seeing new product reviews, card making tips, tricks, and techniques, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can be notified every single time I have a new video available. As always, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. You can see the Lunar paste entire... Now that you've seen a few... What? Okay, one more time.